Merry Christmas. So here we are live. My wife persuaded me that I've actually had very little time to be studying for 1 Corinthians, which is where our church is at, because I've been spending so much time reviewing all my Christmas notes. So she persuaded me that maybe this year I'll just talk and go live. And then maybe I'll save these videos and in the future I can edit them and add all the pictures. Though today pictures would be super helpful. We're going to talk about Santa Claus, as well as an odd character by the name of Krampus. I had no intent talking about Krampus, but then I got interested and I kind of wanted to know who this Krampus guy was. Because if you've ever seen any of the pictures of Krampus today, that's straight up from Satan, right? I mean, it's like the devil. And I did some research, and guess what? He's straight up the devil and Satan. So there. So why am I defending it? Well, you'll find out in just a little bit. That said, though, couple things I want to talk about to lead in. Yesterday, I talked a little about this idea of hermeneutics and truth and whatnot. Today, to start us off, I want to address something that's really important when it comes to people making claims and accusations about long-standing traditions and other things like that. Firstly, you know, when someone comes up and says, this is what you've always believed, now here's some extra facts about it, you know, take it, leave it, whatever, but work with it, but when someone comes up and says, everything you believed has been a lie, and I'm going to explain why, you need to check that stuff. You need to check it before you take it all hook, line, and sinker. Honestly, there's nothing new under the sun. And when people show up saying, this is something new, did you know that Santa Claus is Odin? Well, that's the thing, is people are interested in things that are new. It attracts people. And secrets being unfolded, it plays to our flesh. It really does. And we might not think that way. But oftentimes, something new and exciting takes people hook, line, and sinker. And that's what I see on YouTube and other online channels and stuff today, is people being sucked in to stuff that isn't really based on truth. And so do me a favor, all my regulars, I see you guys, why don't you click share today and just share this video out and help spread truth. I want to see people believing in true things. I don't care about how you practice your Christmas. I just want to clear the air so at least we have some peace knowing what the truth is about these Christmas traditions. And so my last little thing before I start on St. Nicholas and Krampus is primary and secondary sources. Please understand that a primary source is something that your history teacher tried to teach you long ago, and you were bored out of your mind because you're thinking to yourself, when am I going to ever use this junk? These people are all dead and gone. And then you became a Christian and you realize history actually can be kind of cool. So primary sources are sources that come from the source itself. The book of Matthew is a primary source because Matthew was there with Jesus. Make sense? Commentaries on Matthew are secondary sources. People who are reading Matthew and doing some stuff like that. People who have done research. This, what you're watching right now, is maybe considered a secondary source. In a sense, you're watching my commentary on primary sources. I guess that's technically a secondary source. It's a commentary on the primary source. Now, when people make claims like this is where something came from, this is the tradition, and they give you no primary sources, we have a problem. When I get to December 25th, which I think we'll do on Friday, and talk about some of these things regarding dates and things like that, we got to go back in history and find actual archaeology with things written on it, right? Or documents that we still have copies of, that, and then we can only go back in history so far. And so we can date things to a point, and then beyond that, we don't know. Let's see here. Okay. So I'm just going to mention, I'm going to try to give you as much data and sources and what we can track in history. Let's talk Santa Claus. Let's talk Krampus. One more bonus Christmas tree fact. I didn't find this till this morning, and I just stumbled on it. Isaiah verse 60 chapter 60, verse 13, and it's describing God's temple. And it says, the glory of Lebanon shall come to you, the cypress, the pine, and the box tree together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. Does God know that decorating the temple with pine is a pagan thing? How dare he? Anyway, I just thought that was just funny because, again, the Bible does talk about pines, and it also talks about decorating God's sanctuary with pine. So I hope that practice isn't too pagan for God to do. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Krampus first. I want to focus more on St. Nick. That was my whole topic today, and then Krampus snuck in there. So there's myths out there. There's these accusations, claims that, well, Krampus, and I actually even find this on the Encyclopedia Britannica and Smithsonian. Well, Krampus, many believe, was the son of the Norse god Hel. And it was part of, pagan worship in the winter solstice. Well, right off the bat, we run into some problems. Because when someone tells you Krampus is the son of the Norse god Hel, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I didn't curse. Because Hel was a woman. And this is where I'm just getting into, like, when you mess up some facts like that, you've got problems. Hel was a Norse goddess, and Hel was the most common name of the goddess. In pop culture, and ancient, but more so in pop culture, she's more commonly known as Hela. Right? And we know Thor, Hela, Ragnarok, whether you're watching Marvel or you actually know some Norse mythology. But one of the problems we run into is that Krampus really seems to have originated out of Germany and Austria. And they have their own mythology. And it's not Norse mythology. And again, you back up this whole Santa being Odin, Krampus being the son of the goddess Hel. You just can't find anything. I can show you two pictures and be like, look how they look alike. But I can find some other fat dude in a white beard and be like, look how they look alike. There's no historical, nothing. And if you can find it, if you're watching a recording of this on YouTube, or post it, ask questions. You guys who are watching right now live or recorded, ask questions because I want to know the truth. See, I'm not committed to Christmas celebrations. I'm committed to the truth, and I'm willing to overturn any stone. And so if people find older documents and data that I wasn't able to come up with, share it with us. But that said, this guy Krampus, now what is the traditional Krampus? We don't really see Krampus, this character, this evil character who's coming alongside of Santa Claus, until the 1880s. Okay? Now, a lot of these other traditions go way further back than that, but in the 1880s, we begin to see postcards and other things with this demonic-looking guy and Santa. What are the characteristics of the traditional Krampus? I.e., if we know he is Krampus, he's not some other guy, we take it all the way back, 1880s, the first time we see this character. He is all black. He has fur all over. He has two big long horns. He's got a long red tongue that's always dangling out. He's got cloven feet, like a goat, right? And he always seems, he's often carrying switches in which to beat the children. And he also typically, pretty much always, has chains. He's always bound in chains, or has chains at his feet or chains nearby him. Now, here's the interesting thing is that we can't tie that into any pagan thing. Now, let's get one thing clear. Satanic, pagan, they're not actually the same. Satan's like a real person. And satanic worship or Christian interpretations of who Satan and the devil and demons are, that's like biblical stuff. Pagan is not biblical stuff. I think demons might have taken on form and done things that have inspired many pagan gods. But there's a difference between pagan and demonic. Now, in those miracle plays, here we are again going back to the miracle plays or the mystery plays or the morality plays. What's funny is, unlike what you might assume today, Satan was often the comedic relief in the miracle plays. the demons were often comedy. And you can go back, and I forgot the name of the website, but I'll put it in the comments down below or in the description. I found a really good resource with a lot of good historical references. But in there, you can even find transcripts of these old miracle plays, and you'll find Satan was always getting beat up and thrown in jail, thrown in hell. He was imprisoned and thrown in hell. That was something we saw all the time, and he often was actually a comedic relief in these plays because they always personified Christ as the victor or the saints as the victors, and Satan and the demons being defeated. And it was, it got a laugh out of the crowd. And this was medieval, late medieval times. So again, from 1000 to 1500, this was a norm to see the demons on stage. And quite often, what we see Krampus looking like, he doesn't really look like any known god or pagan character. We don't really find. The closest thing you might find is Pan. And here's the thought. I don't think Krampus came from Pan, which Pan had some goat features, but it's still not quite the same. But I wouldn't be surprised if the medieval church, when they were trying to come up with what should Satan look like in our plays, if they pulled some features from pagan gods. Now, they're trying to decide what does Satan look like in our play. They weren't making statements on theology. It kind of was a statement on theology, I guess. But let's move on. We got to get to St. Nicholas here. So here's the catch, though, is that we've got this guy. He's always got these chains. He was portrayed, it seems like, from these miracle plays. But then where does St. Nicholas come into all this? How did this character end up with St. Nick? So St. Nicholas of Myra, okay, he was born in Turkey. We see Myra mentioned as one of the brief stops in Paul's journeys as he's on his way to go to prison, I believe, in the book of Acts. And so Myra was a city, a town, and one of the bishops there was a guy by the name of St. Nicholas. Now, tradition, it's all we got, but hey, his birthday was March 15th of 270 AD, and his death date, he died on December the 6th. Now, there are these old stories about him. One is that he calmed the storm at sea to save a bunch of sailors, and he saved some sailors from wrongful execution. It was a port city, so there was a lot of sailing stories, and St. Nicholas actually became a patron saint of sailors. And also, though, chopping down a tree possessed by demons and clearing out the temple of Artemis at Ephesus and driving out the demons that were there. So St. Nick actually became very known as a demon exorciser. Now, again, are any of those stories true? I have no idea. I'm just going to even lean and say no. They're probably just traditions. But they're historical traditions. They are something we have in history written down that we can verify this is what people believed. And one of the most famous stories of St. Nicholas was there was a man with 3 daughters who were in danger of going into prostitution because he could not afford their dowry, the cost of getting them wed. And so good old St. Nicholas threw some money and paid for it. Some versions say through a window. Other versions say he tossed it down through the chimney, and as he threw it through the chimney, some of that money ended up in one of their socks or stockings that were hanging by the chimney to dry. Again, they're traditions, but they are traditions. These are real traditions that have existed for a long time. Now, most of what you learn about St. Nicholas is like 500 years after he died. There is the life of St. Nicholas of Myra, and it was written between 814 and 842 by a writer by the name of Michael the Archimandrite. Now, St. Nick, what we do know, written by more church historians, was that he was thrown in prison by Diocletian because he was an outspoken man. He really did stand up for the faith. And when he was finally released by Constantine, the people, they rejoiced at him being released, calling him confessor of the faith. And so St. Nicholas was a guy, and again, he was Nicholas back then. They made him a saint later on. But he was a guy who was well respected by the people. And the last of the great stories about the real St. Nicholas is that he attended the Council of Nicaea. Now, some people say, oh, he couldn't have been there because he wasn't the right rank. Well, history records that he was there and that he joined under the bishop that he was under. And another tradition that is around, and it's written in our histories, is that Arius, who was the main enemy or the bad guy of the Council of Nicaea, he is one promoting the Arian heresy, which was denying the deity of Christ. This guy Arius denied that Jesus was God, and so Saint Nick supposedly punches him in the face when this guy starts singing a song about how Jesus was actually a created being, and he starts going, and so the tradition is Saint Nick took him out. See, I like this guy already. Now, we've got to do a lot of fast forwarding now, because what we find happen is Saint Nicholas is memorialized as a saint by the Roman Catholic Church, and for over 1,000 years then, he is memorialized on the day of his death, December the 6th. Now, if you're a part of the Eastern Orthodox Church, it was actually December 19th. Same thing with Christmas, right? We see Christmas at 25th in one church, January 6th in the other church. Both churches always were a little bit off from each other on what they thought the correct dates were. And I'm not worried about if it's this date or that date. I'm just saying this is what the church traditions were. Now, one quick thing, it's a reminder. I'm not here today to tell you exactly what happened. I don't know exactly what St. Nicholas did. I don't know which of those traditions are true. What we're trying to find out is Santa Claus and Krampus from a pagan origin or a Christian origin? Krampus ain't never stepping foot in my house. I'm never going to celebrate that fool. But is it truly pagan or not? So, moving a bit forward. During these miracle plays, remember the mystery plays told Bible stories, the miracle plays told the stories of saints. In the miracle plays, of which St. Nicholas had his plays often done on the day of his death, his St. Nicholas Day, which was December the 6th, they would portray St. Nicholas and they would show the feats that he was known for. And yes, throwing the money into the stocking of the young girls that he paid their dowries, that's one of the things that he did. But he also had a lot of plays of him fighting demons because he had this tradition of him being a demon exorciser. And so quite often you would see Saint Nick in these plays side by side with these little black demon characters. And he would defeat them, he would enslave them in chains, and he would cast them down into hell. Now, moving forward to more modern traditions. Again, we move now into the Reformation. Okay, in the 16th century, early 16th century, 1500s, the same time we start seeing Christmas trees popping up, right, is around the same time that we see the Reformation. Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Knox, I mean, you get all these guys in the Reformation, and the big thing with the Reformation was they were separating themselves from Catholicism. So Catholic things were bad, and they wanted to be Protestants. Well, they pretty much banned all worship of the saints. Got no problem with that. Don't think we should be worshiping people, right? But in comes the stubborn Dutch. I'm just making Dutch jokes. I was joking with my Dutch friends last Friday about this. And so the Dutch Reformed Church, which I'm in Grandview, and locally we've got some Dutch Reformed around here, right? Well, it was the Dutch who, they're part of the Reformation, and the Dutch Reformed Church was a big part of that, but they were pretty stubborn when it came to getting rid of one of their favorite holy days, St. Nicholas Day. Now, St. Nicholas, to the Dutch, St. Nick, Olaus, is Sinterklaas. Now, Sinterklaas, they still practice today, and I was talking to some of our local Dutch dairy farmers, and they say, yeah, their families here in the lower valley of Washington still are practicing St. Nicholas Day. And the idea is the 6th is his day of his, it's the Saint Day, and the 5th is the day that he would come and he brings presents to children. And so what we find is that St. Nicholas, if you want to I'm going to finish the whole Krampus thing. traditionally what it was that Krampus was an enslaved demon that St. Nicholas had vanquished. He vanquished this demon in whatever, fight, and he's got the chains. And you say originally he always had chains on him, and St. Nick would bring presents to the children, and Krampus, his henchman that he's enslaved, he would discipline the bad kids, bringing the coal. He has the switches. So again, this is all weird tradition stuff. And if I think today Krampus has been taken far into the demonic realm. But here's the catch. Krampus is demonic. He is a slain demon or a defeated demon. He's not pagan. There's a difference. So I'm not into Krampus. I don't think it's gotten a little weird and demonic these days when I see what people are doing with Krampus. But what I am saying is that it doesn't have a pagan origin. It actually has a Christian origin, and it has to do with Christians and demons and the real stuff we deal with. Now, as far as Santa Claus goes, though, here's what we can go through and say. Where's my notes? I've got a note on this I don't want to lose. Aha! So, in America now, we have newspapers. You can go on newspaper.com and look at newspapers from the 18th century. I had a blast looking at newspapers from London during 1774, 1775, 1776, reading from the Londoner perspective what was going on in the colonies and the Declaration of Independence coming out, and it's cool stuff. Well, you can go back to 1773 and 1774, before the Declaration of Independence was signed, and newspapers were taking note of large Dutch gatherings in the New York area where they were celebrating St. Nick Day, December 5th and 6th. Now, we find by 1804, John Pritchard, a member of the New York Historical Society, he was distributing woodcuts on St. Nick's Days at the Society's annual meeting. So the New York Historical Society, he's handing out these wood carvings of St. Nicholas, and in those wood carvings you would find stockings hung up by the fire, filled up with toys for the children. And again, he was a patron, St. Nick was a patron saint of sailors early on, and later he became a saint really involved with children, giving gifts to children. And if I didn't mention it, actually, St. Nick Day and the Dutch tradition with giving gifts, it was originally only children got gifts. Adults did not exchange gifts. It was just St. Nicholas bringing gifts for the children. 1809, American author Washington Irving, best known for his short stories Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So it's that guy, the author of those. He wrote The History of New York. And in his History of New York, he made St. Nicholas the patron saint of New York. Now, again, we're in the early 1800s in America. December 5th and 6th, St. Nick Day, children were given gifts. There's early American records of also lots of people celebrating St. Nicholas Day on the 18th and the 19th. And that would be the people who come from an Eastern Orthodox background, which was plenty of those in America at that time. And also there was a popular tradition of giving out gifts on New Year's Eve. And that was between adults. By 1820, we have in newspapers advertisements in the December month where stores are advertising for people to come and buy gifts for the gift-giving season. Not for one particular day, though. Some people are doing it on the 5th and the 6th. Some people are doing it on the 18th and the 19th. Some people are doing it on the 31st on New Year's Eve. It isn't until 1821 that we have a story called The Children's Friend get printed. The full title is The Children's Friend, a New Year's present, New Year present to the little ones from 5 to 12. It was a booklet containing a poem about Santa Claus along with 8 hand-colored engravings, and its price was 25 cents. And it contains the first visual representation of Santa Claus, his sleigh and reindeer. So we have nothing with sleighs and reindeer prior to 1821. And it's worth noting that it was him showing up on New Year's Eve. So now we have St. Nick, who's normally the 5th and 6th, the 18th and 19th. Now St. Nick's showing up on New Year's. But on December the 23rd of 1823, in The Sentinel, a newspaper from Troy, New York, we have an anonymous poem released entitled A Vision, entitled A Visit from Saint Nicholas. And this has Saint Nicholas arriving on Christmas Eve. It took 14 years before someone finally claimed authorship. 1837, Clement Clark Moore claims authorship for the writing. He was a professor, I believe, and a scholar, and this writing of his wasn't very scholarly, and so at first he wanted to remain anonymous. But all said and done, that story is the first story we have that actually ties Saint Nick, Santa Claus, Sinterklaas, to Christmas. And today the story is more commonly known by its first line, "'Twas the night before Christmas." And all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And so, that's what we have for Santa Claus. That's the grand finale, is that 'twas the night before Christmas. So, Santa didn't start as some depiction of Odin or some other weird thing that people have said from here or from there. It started with Saint Nick, a real person who loved the Lord Jesus Christ and did some good things. How did Saint Nick get to Christmas? Well, as you can see, it was a long conglomeration of different celebrations and different events kind of coming together. This is why, one, I don't do Saint Nick with my kids. We have pictures of Santa in some of the stuff. It's like he's not like banned from our home, but we don't put Santa on our presents because he's not real. And that's just not what we do. We don't do the tooth fairy either, for that matter. But he's not banned from our homes, and he's not of pagan origin. And so it's definitely not something worth fighting over. So, again, that's a lot of information. I know these are a little longer than my normal talks, but I'm trying to give you everything I've got. I'm going to say it one more time, too. I did my best to find historical references, things that you could pin down in history. You can find the newspaper articles. You can find the Children's Friend in 1821. You can find A Visit from St. Nicholas, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and I will challenge you. Find something before 1823 that shows Santa Claus or St. Nick or whoever you want to call him showing up on Christmas Eve. I couldn't find anything anywhere. And so this is just showing how these things came together. And so they have an innocent and traditional historical background, not really pagan. If you want to have Santa, go right ahead and have Santa. If you want to explain to your kids that we remember someone who gave a great gift and he helped these poor girls who needed money to get married, tell them that story. And tell them why we remember that guy is because he was a confessor of Christ and he did prison time for Jesus. That's a cool story. So, all that said, I want to do some serious prayer before bringing Krampus into the situation. But, again, demonic, not pagan. There's a difference. All right, guys. I will see you tomorrow. What's on the agenda for tomorrow? I forget what's on the agenda. I think tomorrow we'll either be talking about the manger and the shepherds and the magi, maybe taxation under Quirinius. That's kind of boring, but factual and historical and important to know when it comes to people mocking Christmas. So, all that said, I will see you guys tomorrow at 7:30. Yes, we will be live. And hopefully someday I'll come back and I can add the pictures of Krampus and Santa and the wood carvings and all these other cool things that I got to see on my journey researching. Merry Christmas to all, and to all, a good Tuesday.